At the Letters, brought to you by the all-new 2019 Ford Ranger, Ben Nicholson-Smith, Arden Zwelling. It is not the last week of the season. I wish it was. It's almost the last week of the season. We're nearly there. I think we're almost down to single digits left in terms of games played for the Toronto Blue Jays. They win, they lose. It doesn't really matter. All that really matters between now and the end of the season is, does anybody get hurt? And guys getting hurt. Tim Meza, Tommy John surgery, out for all of next season. Vladdy Guerrero Jr., rib cage injury coming out of Wednesday's game. This season, he's had an oblique issue, a knee issue, a rib cage issue. We're not sure right now as we sit here whether or not he's going to play again this year. It depends on the severity of the injury, which we do not know yet. But I do think this is a good time to kind of look at the season that Vladdy Guerrero Jr. has had. Would you rate it a disappointment? Would you rate it what's the opposite of a disappointment? Pleasant surprise, I guess? Or would you, encouraging? How would you rate it?
Well, I think it has to be evaluated relative to the insane expectations that Vladdy Guerrero Jr. faced, and partly due to people like ourselves who are talking about his potential as a franchise-changing player. And so compared to those expectations, which were among the loftiest we have ever seen for a player coming to the major leagues, it's a disappointment. I don't think there's any two ways about it, really. I mean, this is someone who has hit at the major league level better than league average, and his OPS plus is around 110. So he's definitely producing, but when you compare that to what we thought he could be, when you compare that to the stretches that we saw from him at times, and you factor in the defense, which has definitely been a weakness for him compared to the standard set at third base around the league. You factor in the injuries. I think it has to be considered a disappointment.
It absolutely does, which is kind of funny to sit here now saying that after sitting here like not that long ago, man, like 5 months ago, and being like, wow, look at this guy's minor league numbers. And in a way, Vladdy Guerrero Jr. is a victim of his own success.
Right.
Because his minor league OPS over the course of his minor league career was like 950, and he walked more than he struck out. He put up minor league numbers that are absolutely uncommon in this game, and it's always dangerous to assume that that's just going to translate to the majors. And obviously he started with quite a slump when he first came up and did not look great at all, and then he caught fire for a while, and now he's kind of turned back into slumping and like arguably looks a little bit out of gas in the last couple of weeks. Like looks like a guy who is like tired right now and is ready for the season to be over.
Yeah, and it might be, like you said, depending on that injury. So I think when you look at the hot streaks, you can see the potential. I mean, we saw it in August where he was one of the best rookies in baseball, one of the best hitters in baseball, along with Bo Bichette, kind of quietly through it that month. And we saw it for stretches earlier in the season too, where Vladdy just showed that he can make contact like no one else. He's got insane power. We saw that in the home run derby, and that was an impressive display from Vlad. But with those strengths in his game, we've also seen him chasing more than I thought we would at breaking balls off the plate. We've seen him make a lot of defensive mistakes. We've seen the injuries. So there are signs there, and I still look at this guy as someone who has incredible franchise-changing potential for this team. That hasn't changed for me. But if we're evaluating this season, it definitely fell short of expectations.
You know what he looks like? He looks like he's 20. Like he looks like he's supposed to be in his like junior year of college.
Right.
Like he looks like he's supposed to be pre-draft right now if he was a college player. And he's in the majors. So like, where were you when you were 20, right? Like how did you deal with failure when you were 20? And we see Vladdy Guerrero Jr. not deal with failure very well, which I think explains some of the chasing. Because you'll see when he gets a pitch that is off the plate, that is called a strike, you can see it in his eyes. You can see it in his entire body language that he's not happy with it. And then usually after that, you see him chase and you see him expand. And part of what made him so good in the minors was his plate discipline and was not chasing crap and was being able to force pitchers into the zone where he can make really, really good contact, where he has a preternatural ability to get the barrel of his bat on pitches all around the zone. And that's why you see the exit velocities. Like I haven't looked recently, but for a while this year, he had the hardest hit ball in the majors and he had a bunch in like the top 20. The guy can barrel it up. He just needs to get pitches in the zone. So, I think we are seeing him adjust to some of the challenges of being at the majors and failing in front of as many people as he is, and learning to deal with major league umpires and strike zones that are inconsistent, and the treatment that rookies get in their first go round in the big leagues. They don't get the benefit of the doubt on a lot of calls. The other side of that is he's 20. He's probably not taking his conditioning seriously enough. The body composition isn't where it needs to be. And I mentioned oblique injury, rib cage injury. He had the knee issue earlier this year, which didn't cost him much time, but he still went for the MRI. You don't go for an MRI when everything's great in your knee. Clearly something was wrong, and he had a similar issue in the same knee the year prior. I think the conditioning and the body composition has to absolutely be a focus this offseason, because next year you don't want to see a similar September where Vladdy looks tired.
Yeah, I think you raised a couple good points there. And to start with the point about failure and the way that he's had to deal with that, I think it's really true that these guys, especially top prospects, they arrive at the major leagues having not really failed all that much in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
And
Him especially,
yeah. So you imagine how fun would it have been to be Vlad Jr. in 2015, 16, 17, 18, when you are just crushing minor league pitching. Right. You are just astonishing these coaches around you, and onlookers and prospect gurus and media members are just in awe of everything that you're doing. I mean, and it really was awesome what Vladdy was doing. So that would have been incredibly fun. And then to get to the major leagues, incredibly fun. He hits a double in his first major league game. His dad is on hand to see it. He's just riding this wave. And then I think he came face to face with reality to some extent, where major league pitching is really, really good. And they were able to expose some weaknesses in his game, whether it was just painting the edges of the strike zone and knowing that they were going to get those calls, making him chase a little bit. We've seen pitchers succeed against Vlad in ways that they never had before. And then when that happens, he has to make adjustments, and he has to find out, okay, who am I going to turn to if I am feeling down on myself? Who am I going to turn to if I need extra time in the cages? Who do I trust when it comes to my swing? Because I have no doubt that there are tons of people out there, even within the Blue Jays organization, who are willing to give Vladdy pointers. So who does he listen to? Is it Justin Smoke? Is it Guillermo Martinez? Is it Dave Hudgens? And who does he tune out? Because he can't possibly take in all the information from these voices. So, to me, those are challenges that would be, I'm a lot older than 20 years old, and when I
just a bit.
Yeah, when I'm trying to get better in my job, I have to make those same decisions myself, but that's not an instantaneous process.
Right.
So to try to do that at 20, when everyone's watching every single move that you make, I think that'd be really hard.
So what did the Blue Jays do to get Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to come back next season in better shape and better conditioned and better able to withstand the rigors of a full season? We've kind of seen the load management of Vladdy this year a little bit. It's interesting to see that Bo Bichette has played every single day since he came up, and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is getting a day off, every 3 or 4. Clearly, there's a reason why those two players at very similar points in their careers are being treated very differently in terms of their workload. So I would expect that to continue next season, but clearly work needs to be done this offseason in order for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to be better conditioned in 2020.
Yeah, exactly.
What year is this? 2020.
Yeah, next year, whatever that one is. So yeah, I think you're right. When you think about that next step, it is important for him to arrive at spring training in the absolute best condition possible. So that's a given. We would all agree with that. So if you're the Blue Jays, then I think this is where it comes down to really knowing your own personnel. And you need to assess who is it within the organization that Vladdy trusts the most. And you need to have that person deliver the message to him that, hey, man, you're going to have to go and show up in as good shape as you possibly can. That probably means working out or spending a lot of time at the Dunedin facility, where they have their staff on hand and they have a lot of resources there from a health and nutrition standpoint. My sense is the Jays would want him to be there. So is that Montoyo? Is that Guillermo Martinez? Is it Ross Atkins? Who's that person that Vladdy trusts the most? And make sure that that person delivers that message and makes it known to Vlad that that's really important for him and the team.
It's hard to ask a guy who lives in the Dominican Republic and whose family is in the Dominican Republic to just be in Florida for his entire offseason. I don't necessarily think the Blue Jays need to do that. What I would do is I would say, look, the season ends at the beginning of October. go home. You got October, November, December. Enjoy yourself. Like, recover, rest, spend time with family. Like, see people, all that. And then starting January, come to Dunedin and let's set up like a little camp for you. From the beginning of January through to the middle of February when spring training begins. Let's have like a little 6-week mini camp and come in, and we're gonna set up your meals, and we're gonna have you working out every day with our people, and we're gonna be measuring. We're gonna establish some baselines for you for 2020 in terms of your power and your flexibility and all those different kinds of things. Then we're gonna use those to inform how we train you throughout the season. It's kind of similar to what Jose Bautista had players doing, back in the day, like 2015, 14 years, where he would have a bunch of guys down because Bautista lived like near Dunedin, have a bunch of guys down to Florida, and they'd all work out together. I remember Aaron Sanchez taking part in that, like Ryan Goins, Kevin Pillar, like a lot of players made use of that, and it kind of became a bit of a culture around the team. And, guys were they were more ready to start the year off when spring training arrived.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea, and it's if done well, then absolutely that would pay off. And the interesting thing is, if you deliver that message poorly to Vladdy, then you run the risk of him feeling confused or alienated from the team, from the team's decision makers. It's a tricky thing because I'm sure you saw the New York Times article about his grandmother and the cooking that she does for him still. A really good article by James Wagner, and it really kind of just underline that connection that they have and how important that is to Vladdy. So you can't just go to him and be like, hey, you totally change everything that you've done as a major leaguer, as a person. That's not going to be something that you want to just trample over. You have to do it with grace and consideration for his own kind of history with his grandmother. So there are all these different aspects of it. His own home in the Dominican, which he's been away for now for a long time. So maybe, like you said, he gets to go home for a couple of months, spend some time there, and then start it up. But the stakes are high, and you have to be pretty careful with this one.
The last point with Vladdy is the defense, which is continuing to progress, let's say. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. so far, 17 errors on the season. He is a negative in DRS. He is a negative in UZR, not a good major league defender. We have to remember that he only started playing third base shortly after he was drafted by the Toronto Blue Jays. So he's only been playing third base at a very high level for a very short amount of time. And fans don't get to see how far he's already come. Like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. In like Lansing or Dunedin third base was a lot worse than it is now. And Blue Jays fans are just seeing the product now, and that's understandable. But he's come a long way. So clearly he can get better and he can grow and he can improve. And the Blue Jays are in a position right now where they can offer him that runway at the major league level to get better and to develop in the big leagues and to continue to progress. And next year they're going to be able to offer that to him as well, I would imagine, unless they blow the doors off the American League East, which nobody's really expecting them to. By 2021, that runway ends. That's the end of that. That's the year where you need outs and you need somebody who can make plays in the big leagues. So I don't think that you're moving Vladimir Guerrero Jr. anywhere next season. I think you're continuing to let him play third base. But if there isn't market improvements next year in terms of his defense, which is, let's be honest, not good enough for the major leagues at third base right now, if he doesn't get a lot better next year, 2021, he's probably my first baseman or designated hitter.
Yeah, or maybe even corner outfielder, conceivably. But I agree. I don't think the time for that discussion is now when it comes to a potential position change, because he's just young. He's just 20 years old. And you look at guys like Derek Jeter when they had their first pro seasons. You look more recently at Rafael Devers, who, when he came up and first started playing with the Red Sox, that was not pretty at third base. And he's gotten a lot better. Now it's not really as much of a talking point around Devers. So I think Vladdy has a chance to continue making improvements. And we've seen that even this year at the major league level, he's improved. So if that continues, great. He's a third baseman. If not, you figure something out. But I think for the next little while, you don't even have to worry about making that choice. You just keep working at it, try to keep working on the ground balls, on the throws and the reads, everything that goes along with that. And eventually he will get better, and we'll see if it's good enough.
So Vladdy Guerrero Jr. right now, 783 OPS. I think we all assume he's going to be better next year.
Yeah.
If I were to set the over-under of his 2020 OPS at 850, would you take the over or the under?
I'm definitely taking the over.
On
100%. Yeah,
850?
easy over. You?
I might go under.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. I think I'll go under just to be different.
Wow. Well, that's a little preview of the 2020 over-under.
Yeah, no, I reserve the right to change this when we do our over-unders next year.
Yeah. Wow.
At the Letters is brought to you by the all-new 2019 Ford Ranger. Built Ford Tough is the foundation of Canada's popular lineup of rugged and dependable Ford pickups. Now even more remarkable with the all-new Ford Ranger, tested under conditions more extreme than you would ever likely encounter. Tim Meza has had Tommy John surgery. He is going to miss all of the 2020 season, return for 2021. What does this mean for the Toronto Blue Jays bullpen? They already needed a lefty. Now they probably really need a lefty.
Yeah, they definitely do. And maybe you get one guy internally. I think Thomas Pannone, when you look at his numbers as a reliever, has been pretty effective in that role. And he has not been effective as a starting pitcher. So to me, move on from Pannone as a starting pitcher. He's done. He had his chance. It didn't work. Now as a reliever, he gets the chance to come in there and be effective in that role where he's actually showing promise. So that's the first move I would make, is make Pannone your lefty reliever. And the Blue Jays seem to be doing that. They haven't started him in the last 6 weeks or so. And then beyond that, they still need to go out and add. No doubt, this is a need for them in the offseason.
I wonder about Pannone as a one-inning high-leverage reliever because of the lack of velocity. Maybe his fastball plays up a little bit out of the bullpen, but so you're playing up from 89 to 91. I think you want somebody with a bit more juice in that spot. I think Thomas Pannone, I agree, works as a reliever, but as a multi-inning guy, as a Sam Gaviglio role type of dude, just from the left side. I think for my lefty that I'm bringing in to get a couple lefties out, or a couple a lefty, a switch hitter, and another lefty out in the 7th or 8th inning. I want somebody who's mid-90s with a wicked breaking ball, and that's not Thomas Pannone.
Right. I mean, you want that, but in the absence of that guy, who I'm not seeing on the Blue Jays roster, I don't think it's Buddy Boshiers. So, I mean, you got to work with what you have to an extent, right? So I'd start with Pannone and then try to find that guy too.
True. Travis Bergen, a Blue Jay again. Maybe that's somebody who fills that role next year. So while we're trying to add Blue Jays relievers, let's see if we can also subtract one in Ken Giles, who we expect the Blue Jays to explore the trade market for this offseason. They obviously explored it at the trade deadline, couldn't get something done. For a while there, the usage was kind of inconsistent with Ken Giles. The last few outings, it's been a bit more, we've seen him more often. We haven't seen him take a week where you just don't see him at all. We've kind of seen him in an every other day pattern now, but you haven't seen him go back-to-back days in a long, long time. If you're a team looking at maybe acquiring Ken Giles this offseason, what are you reading into when you look at his usage and his performance on the mound right now?
It's a red flag for me, or at least a dark yellow veering into orangey red flag, because you look at the times in the last few months where Giles has pitched back-to-back days. You had one at the beginning of June. After that, he takes 2 weeks off. One at the beginning of July. After that, he takes 2 weeks off. Then he doesn't go back-to-back at all in August. Goes back-to-back the beginning of September. Takes 1 week off. So that, to me, is a pretty clear pattern of when Ken Giles goes in back-to-back days, he needs a week off or more. And that's not good if you're a contending team. You want to be able to turn to someone when you have a couple games in a row, day game after a night game. There are tons of occasions in the course of a season where a good team will win twice in a row by a narrow margin. And if you're a good team contemplating meeting what we believe to be a relatively high asking price for Ken Giles, then you want to be comfortable using him in those situations. So to me, that would be a concern. And I think that the Yankees, obviously, when they looked at his medicals, were not totally thrilled with what they saw, because according to Ken Rosenthal, that deal was scuttled at the last minute after some advanced talks. And you don't even have to know the medical reports intimately. We obviously haven't seen them, and yet I think that the results kind of speak for themselves when you look at a guy who needs an extended break every time he goes back-to-back out.
When you look at the usage for Ken Giles, like it almost looks like somebody who is, I'm speculating here, but who is like carrying a bit of an injury, but you don't want to shut him down and you want to keep using him. Hey, maybe because you're going to try to trade him in the offseason. Because Ken Giles has obviously had elbow issues this season. I mean, he's had the inflammation in there. He's been on the IL because of it. As you said, like, you know, after he pitched 3 back-to-back days, that clearly aggravated something for him. And you just kind of look at the way the Blue Jays have been really careful with picking their spots with them down the stretch. Like, it kind of looks like there are, you know, if this was a different scenario and this wasn't somebody who you were invested in their trade value, maybe would have been shut down by now. Speculating, but from an outsider's perspective, it kind of looks like that.
Yeah, it's not hard to imagine. I mean, you think about the wear and tear that any pitcher has, and from what I understand, you could basically take an MRI of any pitcher's arm at any time and find a reason to put them on the IL. I mean, these guys just throw so much, and it's actually something, as a bit of a side note, it's something that some pitchers kind of watch and monitor. And Ryan Borucki was telling me over the weekend that he is going to be more mindful of the just kind of day-to-day tossing they do before games. You know, at 2 p.m. in the afternoon or 4 p.m., they're out there just throwing and throwing and throwing. So they're all banged up. They all throw so much. And so I'm sure that they wanted to find a reason to put Giles on the IL. They could. Now, they don't want to. I think it's something worth watching. It's something I intend to write about in the next week or so as the season winds down for Sportsnet.ca, because it is one of those interesting things worth keeping an eye on.
It's an interesting point because some guys want to be throwing a lot in order to keep their arms loose. They think that's actually a benefit to their arm care. Like, you look at some of the driveline protocols, like they want you throwing a lot. And sometimes, like, throwing really aggressively, like really short, high-intensity bursts with, like, weighted balls. And you're throwing them in interesting, you're throwing them behind you. And you're, like, watch some of the Trevor Bauer videos, and he's, like, doing 2 spins and whipping them at a wall. That looks like, really intense. And they've had a lot of success with their arm care. So it's like nobody really, obviously you have to individualize it because nobody's really sure. And I don't think there is like one blanket, arm care routine that's good for everybody. You got to find what works for you. It sounds like for Ryan Borucki, maybe throwing a bit less is what's going to work for him. But it comes back to like the thing where, teams will say, oh, he's missing time because he's got inflammation. Yeah, they all have inflammation.
Yeah.
They all have it.
Yeah.
You can you open up any major league pitcher's like shoulder or elbow, like a surgeon's going to find something to do.
Right. Bone chips or bone spurs or some sort of
fraying.
Yeah, frayed ligaments. There's always going to be something in there. It's just a question of, can the guy pitch through it? Does he want to? Does it make sense for the team? In the case of Giles, we don't know exactly what's going on inside his elbow, and maybe it's pristine for all we know. But generally speaking, pitchers who have been used that much would have some sort of issue there.
And when you look at Giles, just if you take, if you get out of kind of like the weeds of the Blue Jays that we're in, and you just look at his season, it's like, oh, hey, he has a 2.02 ERA.
Yeah.
That's top 10 in baseball among relievers. He has a 14.1 K per 9. Top 10 in baseball among relievers. He's not walking a ton of guys. He's not giving up a ton of home runs, fewer than 1 home run per 9 innings. In the aggregate, like you just look at the line score, you just look at the Fangraphs page, it's like, yeah, he's having a great season. The warning flags come when you just kind of look a bit closer at how he's gotten to this point, but we shouldn't, that shouldn't discredit the fact that he's had a really remarkable year while throwing in the high 90s consistently.
No, it's a good point to go back to those numbers, right? Because we're, again, in the weeds. Sometimes you spend time thinking about, well, why is Derek Law closing out a game for the Jays? And it starts you thinking about Ken Giles. But when you do look at the numbers, wow, impressive. His stuff is nasty. He's obviously got the slider. He's got the fastball. That's what you want to see. And that's one of the reasons he does have trade value. I'm just saying it's not as high as I think it could be.
And you look at the guys who he's keeping company with, like atop those leaderboards. So like in terms of some of the best relievers in baseball, Liam Hendricks, like Adam Ottavino, Zach Britton, Brandon Workman. Those guys all have like 20 more outings than he does.
Right.
So it's been an availability issue. Ken Giles has only appeared in 49 games. Liam Hendricks been in 70. Ottavino, 70. Workman, 68. Britton, 64. Giles isn't yet at 50. And if you are acquiring him to pitch out of the back end of your bullpen and you're trying to win games and contend in 2020, you need him available. Like you can't have this uncertainty of whether or not you're going to be able to go to him, or whether if you push him too hard, like something might snap in the elbow. Like you need him to be on call when you call on him.
Well put.
All right, want to loop back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast and how we evaluate Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s season, because I think we should also evaluate the seasons of Cavan Biggio and Bo Bichette. Let's start with Biggio, because obviously he is the talk of the town at the moment, hitting a cycle. He's on this insane hot streak. I don't know if you've looked at it recently, and you're going to know just by the way that I'm setting this up. But if I had to ask you who has the higher OPS plus and weighted runs created plus between Cavan Biggio and Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who would you say?
Oh, it's Biggio by a hair, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Cavan Biggio is having a better rookie season than Vladimir Guerrero Jr.
And that's before you count the defense.
Right.
Yeah. And the versatility, the base running. He's 13 of 13 stealing bases.
So
he's done a lot.
It's a good season. Yep. And there was a point not that long ago, like maybe 6 weeks ago, where I would have said, Cavan Biggio's just not hitting that well. And he has turned it around in like a big way with a really strong finish to the year, whereas Vladimir Guerrero Jr. has had this really weak finish to the year, and that speaks to the differences in athleticism between the two, I would say, because they both have kind of like that similar plate vision tool. Like Cavan Biggio is an elite plate vision guy, elite discipline guy, and I think Vladimir Guerrero Jr. can be that as well. But Cavan Biggio stuck to it. And even when he was struggling, he stuck with it. He never expanded. The Blue Jays had to say to him, like, hey, could you swing more? Like, can you actually be more aggressive? Because you're so damn patient at the plate. I think that's why Cavan Biggio has kind of come out of this so well. It's because he's stuck to his approach. Like, he's stuck to not swinging a crap and waiting until pitchers were in the zone. And he's been more aggressive on, first pitch heaters, which is obviously a bit of an adjustment to approach. But I think that just in terms of, what he's doing at the plate, he's stayed consistent. And that's why I think he's had better results.
Yeah, the results have been really good. And I think that, sometimes we go through the year and we look for this 30-game chunk or this, 50-game chunk. With Biggio, you just look at the whole season, and the results are there. I mean, the 784 OPS, 14 homers. He's drawing lots of walks, like you said, very patient hitter, and he brings you some versatility. I don't think he's that great of a defender at any one spot where he's just stealing the show defensively, but he's giving you an ability to play first base, second, right field, left. That helps this team. He also could play third in a pinch, although I don't foresee him doing much of that. So I think that is a player you want on your roster. It's a player who still has 5-6 more years with the Blue Jays. Obviously, the off-field intangibles to this point have been stuff that his teammates and coaches speak very highly of. So you like to see that as well. And it's just become easier in the last month, and certainly with that cycle, it's just become easier to envision him as a regular second baseman, and the need for reinforcements there, is probably less of a concern. I think you're pretty comfortable penciling him in as your everyday guy next year.
The only issue I'll take with that is his defense at second base, which is still room for improvement there. And I kind of wonder if, like, the ultimate outcome for Cavan Biggio is he is this team's Marwin Gonzalez, or it's like Ben Zobrist or whatever. And so he, like, is this high on base guy who's going to hit you a bunch of bombs, is going to play, 5 out of 7 days. But on each of those days, he's playing a different position. So he's at second, and he's in right field, or he's in left field, or he's at first, or he's the DH. Like this year, I know the Blue Jays have wanted to give him everyday reps at second just to see what he could be as a second baseman and to continue to allow him to improve, because it probably is the position where he needs to improve the most, and it's a more challenging position to play than first base or than corner outfield. But I do wonder if, ultimately, Jordan Groshans joins this team, if Kevin Smith joins this team, if Santiago Espinal is here. Like, I do wonder if Cavan Biggio ultimately becomes that kind of everyday utility player.
Yeah, and that's great. I think in a way the Jays would love to see that. I don't think he needs to be fixed at second base because, he's certainly not Roberto Alomar out there when it comes to making plays, and that's fine. He's certainly been solid out there. One player I look to as a kind of comp for him is just Neil Walker, and I know it's not the most exciting name, but quietly Neil Walker's had a 21 WAR career. Kind of gives you pretty good offense as a left-handed hitting second baseman. He doesn't field all that much, little bit of power. That's easier to envision. And when you zoom out and you think back to the spring of 2018, I remember him coming out to scrum after one of the games where all the kids were playing, and at the time you're kind of lumping him in with Casey Clemens as far as potential big league upside, right? Like he's more of an afterthought compared to Vlad and Bo. And what he's done in the course of the 2018 and 19 seasons is really impressive. And now he's easy to envision as a major league piece of some kind.
It's a good example of those, like, how the comparisons get thrown around, like, inside the game are, like, so underwhelming. It's like,
Right.
it would be great if he was Neil Walker. But yeah, no, you're right. Cavan Biggio in a very short period of time has gone from org guy to, like, hey, this is part of the core, along with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Lourdes Gurriel Jr. and Bo Bichette, who we must talk about now, because of the kids that we talk about so much with this Blue Jays team, I have not enjoyed watching any of them as much as I've enjoyed watching Bo Bichette. He has entered the big leagues and raked, just went off in his first couple weeks, and like obviously has slowed a bit. Hasn't slowed that much, hasn't slowed insanely, hasn't had a big, massive slump, still coming up with doubles all the time, still, hits a walk-off home run, and he's still, putting the ball in play and getting hits with 2 strikes and attacking and being aggressive early in counts, still running around the bases like a madman and playing a really good shortstop. He's just fun to watch. He is... And the confidence off the field too, and just the way he answers questions, I love it so much. He's a star, man. He's not a star today, but he could be a real star in this game.
I don't know. I think he's kind of a star today.
Yeah.
At least in Toronto.
Yeah, I mean, I meant kind of like nationally.
Right. Yeah, and he has a chance to be. I mean, by this time next year, he could be a star nationally. There's no question about that. It happens pretty quick. When you think about guys like Juan Soto and Ronald Acuna Jr. And I'm not saying he's quite on that level, but he's not necessarily all that far off, and he's got to do it for more than 200 plate appearances before we begin to have that discussion. But yeah, like you said, so much fun. I mean, after the walk-off home run he hit Friday, Charlie Montoyo says Bo Bichette called that shot and said if he got a slider from a lefty, he was going to take him deep and walk it off. And then, we asked Bichette after, so did that really happen? He just kind of goes, yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Admitting it, but not overselling it either. Because the home run swing speaks for itself. When you take a member of the New York Yankees deep and walk off that team in your own home park, that's really cool. A great moment for him. Another good moment for this Blue Jays team to stay there with the Yankees and take a couple games from them. So it's been incredible to watch Bo Bichette this year, and his performance, especially at the major league level, but even at AAA was good. And he's shown that he can hit beyond a doubt. He can hit at this level, and that's huge for this lineup.
You mentioned the 200 plate appearances, right? So he's at 208 plate appearances, 146 OPS plus, 941 OPS, right? So we were talking about 45 games. He has 29 extra base hits. How many plate appearances do you have before the All-Star break? 350? So let's give him 150 more and say he comes down to 135, 140 OPS plus from 146. That's still an All-Star.
Oh, yeah.
That's a guy who's going to the All-Star game if he just had that sample in the first half of the year. And then Bo Bichette is getting that national attention. And then all these writers are coming to his podium to talk to him and talk to him about his dad and talk to him about all these highlights that he's building up and to get those responses and to say, hey, this guy answers questions kind of differently than everyone else does. This 21-year-old is uncommonly confident and professional in this atmosphere, in this environment. If you just took what he's doing now and just put it in a different time of the year, you're talking about a guy who probably does have a lot more exposure.
Yeah, exactly. I think at this rate, we'll see him at the All-Star game in Los Angeles next year. He will be, I think, a much bigger star by then. And it's crazy. I mean, so this is a little bit unfair to do it this way. I understand we're kind of doctoring the numbers, but
Whatever.
On Baseball Reference, they have the per 162 pace. And if he did this for a full season, he would have 14 stolen bases, 40 home runs, and 65 doubles. So that's just the kind of pace that he's setting here. And it's not that he's done it for a full season, but 45 games is not nothing either.
No, in your first 45 games.
Exactly.
Like, you've never played at this level before, and you're 21.
Yeah.
And it's not like he's about to turn 22. Like, he's 21, like, turned 21 this year.
And it's not like we're cherry picking and saying, oh, this is what he's done over his last 45. As you said, it's his first 45. That's insane. And he's doing it at either the most challenging defensive position or probably the second most behind catcher. And he's been fine at shortstop.
Yeah.
Like, his defense has been, he's made mistakes. It's not been perfect, but he can play the position.
He plays it a little bit differently, right? Like, he doesn't play it like textbook. You know, he kind of plays it in his own way, which is another thing that I really like about him, is because it's like I'm not going to compare him to Troy Tulowitzki right now, but it's Tulowitzki-esque in that he gets to balls in his own way, and he like gathers in his own way and throws in his own way. Like, he makes the plays, right? And it's probably not, as a developer, exactly what you want to see. Like, it's probably like not what Louis Rivera teaches in terms of fundamentals, but he makes damn plays, man. And I think he's answered some questions at shortstop. We talked about Cavan Biggio going from org guy to now major league regular. Bo Bichette went from he's going to be a second baseman someday to now you can actually see him sticking at short in the big leagues long term.
Yeah, I think that's the expected outcome. Anything else would be a disappointment right now. If he doesn't play shortstop for the next 5 years for this team. So that's huge. And he's also gone from top prospect. I mean, he entered the season probably as number 8 or 10 in baseball in the prospect rankings to now just one of the most exciting young players in baseball. And that's huge for this team. That's best case scenario for Bo Bichette's season. I don't think that the Blue Jays could possibly have drawn this up any better.
You look at, having Vladdy Guerrero Jr. being the best prospect in baseball coming up, right? Bo Bichette, like, looking like the best prospect in baseball as he comes in. Nate Pearson's going to be top 10 on every prospect list entering next season. You have this developmental success story in Cavan Biggio. You have two young catchers who are playing really well behind the plate, look like a pretty good future tandem defensively and offensively. You have Lourdes Guerrero Jr., who has had, it's safe to say it's a breakout season, right? Obviously was interrupted by injury, but there's no reason why he can't come back next year and continue to do what he did this year. Has this big breakout. Let's not screw that up, Toronto Blue Jays. Like, you have so many good pieces. Like, if you were just, random MLB executive and it was like, hey, here, design a starting point, like, for your franchise that you were trying to build into a contender, having all those pieces in place, pretty damn good, man. Let's not screw this up. Go get some starting pitching this offseason. Address your outfield. Like, turn this thing around. I don't think the Blue Jays are going to make the playoffs in 2020. I'm starting to think, like, you got to be a 500 club.
Yeah, you want to put your players in a position to succeed where it's not like you're breaking camp with, not to pick on these guys, but TJ Zoik and Jacob Wagaspak, and it's just all young guns, and Ryan Baraki, and these guys who have shown promise, Anthony Kay, Trent Thornton. If that's your starting five, all right, I mean, you can kind of squint and see a scenario where everything goes well, but really they need to reinforce. And so that means you're either bringing back Matt Shoemaker or you're signing a couple guys in free agency or both. You're trading for guys. There's a lot of opportunity here, like you said, to make this team just much more watchable, much more entertaining, have them compete deep into the season next year, and if everything breaks right, even contend. But you can't do it without pitching, and you can't do it without adding pitching, in my opinion. You can't do it with only the guys in this system.
Probably can't do it without a center fielder either, is the thing that the Blue Jays are going to have to address at some point. In terms of pitching, like, sure, bring back, like, Matt Shoemaker, like, great. Like, non-tender him and bring him back on whatever deal you want. It's not enough. It's got to be more. It's got to be Zach Wheeler. It's got to be Jake Odorizzi. You got to go talk to Garrett Cole and see what you can do. It's not enough. And the year following, when Trevor Bauer is a free agent, get Trevor Bauer.
Interesting.
Go get Trevor Bauer. You know why the Blue Jays should get Trevor Bauer? Like, he's like, his potential is that of a front of the rotation Cy Young winner. I know he hasn't had the best season. He's dealt with some physical things this year. He buys in to all of the contemporary training methods that you are trying to preach.
He creates them.
If anything, he is the vanguard of that. And he has said publicly that he wants to sign 1-year deals in free agency. He wants to go year to year in free agency. We'll see if he does. But if anyone was going to do it, it would be Trevor Bauer. Yeah. So if you could sign Trevor Bauer to a 1-year contract for the 2021 season, go do it, because then you're not taking a bunch of risk on a starting pitcher. You're getting the upside of a guy who could win a Cy Young. Yeah. And you're getting somebody who should be. I know that his personality has been debated and his clubhouse presence has been debated, but a guy who should be a positive influence on someone like a Nate Pearson who trains with him at Driveline, on other young pitchers in your organization who you want to develop arm care routines and have longevity and learn how to make their curveball as nasty as Bauer's.
How much do you think Bauer costs on a 1-year deal? Like if he does that, right? Yeah. So if he actually follows through and reaches free agency, which I think he will, and then seeks out a 1-year deal, I mean,
40?
40? Yeah, I think it might be higher. Yeah,
45.
Because if you imagine all the teams in baseball that could use Trevor Bauer on a 1-year deal, they're all gonna love the lack of long-term risk. Yeah. They're all gonna love the potential of him as an ace starting pitcher. So yeah, I could see it going to 40 or 45.
And what did the Blue Jays have? Financial flexibility.
Yeah, no, I'm
nothing on the books.
If the Blue Jays, and we're fast forwarding here, but let's say next year goes kind of the way we think it will. Trevor Bauer's a free agent a year from now. If they could sign him for a 1-year, $45 million deal, do you do it?
It would depend on how much money I have to play with that offseason. Like if it doesn't eat up my entire budget, because that offseason I might need to also get a center fielder.
Sure. So let's say that's most, but it's not all of your budget. You can still have some room to play with.
If I still have room to build out my bullpen and probably add a position player bat, absolutely. Like if I could do it, absolutely.
Yeah. As long as the finances made sense.
As long as the finances made sense, as long as Trevor Bauer is still pitching like Trevor Bauer. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a 1-year deal.
I would do that. I think the Jays would too. I don't know. I think they should.
They have a connection with him from Cleveland. He is the type of guy who I think is very put his Twitter aside, is very open-minded. So I think that he would be open to coming to Toronto, whereas some other players in MLB probably wouldn't, because they don't want to cross the border and they don't want to deal with a foreign country. And if you spent your entire life in Alabama, you're going to go to Toronto, right? He, as far as I know, he's not married, doesn't have kids, doesn't have a family that's going to be a that's going to be a concern there, right? In terms of moving that. So he's the type of guy that you could bring here. And he could be a frontline guy. This is like Cy Young caliber. I know he hasn't had the greatest season. It's a really, really good pitcher, man. Like when he wants a strikeout, he gets a strikeout.
Yeah. The sales pitch would have to be really good because there would be a lot of teams interested in doing that. And I think, it's interesting. Trevor Bauer seems like such a single-minded guy when it comes to just trying to get better, and so that's huge. Obviously,
the Blue Jays love that.
Of course, yeah. I mean, he's just so purposeful when it comes to improving himself as a pitcher. Like he's obsessed. He's obviously an obsessive person, and that can work in his favor. It has worked in his favor. It's gotten them this far. So if they could do it, I think that would be a great piece to add.
He is data-driven baseball, and that's what the Blue Jays front office loves. Is okay, what's the data behind these decisions that we're making? Let's actually analyze this. We're not just looking at a scout who said, "Oh, I saw him, he's good," right? We're actually taking data and applying it to our decision making in order to optimize our operations. Trevor Bauer does that with his approach to getting better. That's how he's ended up with one of the best curveballs in the game. That's how he's ended up throwing harder and harder, because he goes to Driveline and he works on this stuff.
You think the Jays, so he was obviously traded this summer from Cleveland to Cincinnati. You You think the Jays asked about him? Because I wouldn't be surprised if they made an inquiry.
I bet you. The thing was, Cleveland clearly needed something in return that was going to help them now.
Yeah.
Right? So
Offense.
they got that. I don't know what the Blue Jays could have offered. Like, it would have had to be a 3-team framework.
Yes.
Where the Blue Jays like send whatever prospects or whatever it was going to be to someone else, then someone else sends the major league talent to Cleveland, and the Blue Jays get Bauer.
Yes. So the Jays in this situation would be the Reds.
Yeah.
Where and the Padres would still be the team sending the bats
Yeah.
to. Although I don't know if the Jays
Puig went
yeah,
to,
right, exactly.
Cleveland too.
So it would have been complicated, but I wonder if they had at least a little bit of a conversation there.
Maybe you could have included like Giles in there, right?
Sure.
That could have been,
right.
Cleveland was looking for a little bullpen help.
Yeah, that's a deal you'd make.
Sign Trevor Bauer. That's what I want the Blue Jays to do. That's Ben Nicholson-Smith. At B Nicholson-Smith on Twitter. I'm Arden Zwelling. Our producers Amol Delich and Drew Livingstone worked the cameras today. Thanks to him. Thanks to you for listening. Talk to you next week on At The Letters.